Evening settles fast in the Tennessee hills. Air thick with the smell of cut grass and rain-soaked clay. Cicadas tuning up like 1,000 tiny engines. On a ridge above Beech Creek, a small house sits in a pocket of trees, the windows catching the final copper light of a June day. A child's giggle once ran through that yard like a bright thread, looping around a swing, across the porch, past the flowers by the steps. You can almost hear it when the wind shifts, like a memory trying to become a sound. And then silence. In June 2021, 5-year-old Summer Moon Utah Wells vanished from this hillside, gone in a way that feels unreal at first, then unbearable. One moment of ordinary. Family, chores, summer boredom, the complicated comfort of home, and the next moment, a chasm. Doors opening, flashlights snapping on, the name repeated into the woods. Summer? Summer. Where did she go? How does a child disappear in the space between a breath in and a breath out? Was the answer on the ridge, in the trees, on the road, or in the split-second choices that build a day? Did she wander? Was she taken? Or did the hills themselves swallow up her footprints, like they've done to stories here for generations? Tonight, you and I will walk this timeline, not as cold recitation, but as a living story. The home, the hill, the searchers, the neighbors, the days that turned into months, and the questions that thicken like mist in a holler at dawn. We'll meet the people who would not sleep, the lawmen who tore their hands on brambles, the communities that kept candles burning long after the news cameras left. We will listen closely to the quiet places, because sometimes the quiet tells you more than the noise ever could. And at every turn, we'll ask the question that haunts these hills. If you were the truth, where would you hide? But first, let's go back, to the ridge, to the house, to a day that begins like 100 others, and ends like no day ever should. What investigators would confront over the next 24 hours would bend every assumption and test every hope. The house on the hill isn't grand. It doesn't need to be. It's a place where shoes pile by the door and dogs know which steps to sleep under. The kind of house where you learn the seasons by the sounds that pass through. Spring rain on tin, summer bugs, autumn leaves like paper, winter wind teeth chattering in the holler. When the sun dips, shadows stack up quick, and the trees knit a dark canopy over the yard. Neighbors are not next door. They are down the hill, past the bend, or across the creek. Out here, you measure distance in curves, not blocks. Inside, life is busy, loud, and ordinary. A television murmurs, a pot cools on the stove, a bucket sits by the steps from earlier chores. From the porch, you can see the gravel lane ribboning down to the road, and beyond that, the layered backs of the mountains like a sleeping animal. It feels safe because it is familiar, and yet the same isolation that comforts can also complicate. Out here, help takes time to arrive. Sound scatters. A call can get lost in the folds of the land. Who could imagine that this hill, this routine, would become the center of a search that pulled in local deputies, state investigators, federal agents, divers, pilots, volunteers, dogs, cameras, and prayers, that the name Summer would be carried between radio towers and church pews, between Facebook posts and handwritten flyers, between strangers who had nothing in common except this child and this sudden hole where a child should be. The ridge watched all of it, silent, impenetrable, waiting. But before the helicopters and headlines, there was a last afternoon, and tiny choices that later would loom like mountains. Think of a summer weekday when the heat sits like a blanket, and time turns syrupy. Chores get done in pieces. Someone runs into town. Someone else lingers by the door. Children drift in and out of rooms and shade, following the bright little currents of their interests. A bug, a toy, a scrap of conversation. This is the landscape of childhood, half fameless, half scheduled, stitched together with snacks and sudden bursts of energy. In the yard, dust rising from a footfall, the faint snap of stems in a patch of flowers by the steps, the scrape of a bucket moved from here to there. Inside the house, the hush of a TV during a commercial, the squeak of the refrigerator door, the rhythm of running water. Little scenes that, in hindsight, become examined and re-examined from 100 angles, the way you worry a stone in your pocket. What time was that? Who saw whom? Did she say anything? Did the dog bark? We are not here to accuse. We are not here to inflame. We are here to see, to understand how ordinary the day looked until it didn't. Because that is the cruel thesis of so many disappearances. The split second between the ordinary and the irreversible is invisible while it is happening. A door, a moment, a hill that falls away fast, and then one call, one sentence that turns the world on its axis. It's late afternoon, nudging toward evening when the emergency call is placed. The words are plain, but their weight is crushing. A child is missing. The local sheriff's office moves immediately, because there's a timer that starts in the head of every dispatcher and deputy when the word child and missing share the same breath. Cars roll, radios crackle. The drone of tires on country road is met by the crunch of gravel up the hill. First responders fan out. One calls the child's name as if volume can add hours back onto the clock. Another notes exit points, sight lines, scent carriers. Someone checks the water down the slope. Someone looks to the road. The house becomes a solar system with a gravity of its own, lights, questions, footprints, handprints on doorknobs, the scuff of boot soles on wooden steps. Neighbors appear like embers caught by the wind. What can we do? A man brings a flashlight. A woman brings bottled water. Someone in a ball cap knows the deer tracks and the game trails and the spots where blackberry brambles catch a sleeve. People point. People run. People pray under their breath. Within hours, the perimeter grows. Deputies overlap with state agents, who overlay with federal support. An Amber Alert is issued. A helicopter thunders overhead, its searchlight raking the hillside like the finger of a god. K9s arrive, noses down, tugging handlers toward possibilities. Maps unfold on hoods of vehicles, coffee rings staining the corners. The sun drops. The temperature follows. The hill breathes in. You want the obvious answer, the quick find. The she was just playing here. The she's safe. You want the word found to explode through every frequency and drown the static. But night keeps its secrets, for now. And as the moon lifts over the ridge, a small detail inside the widening search will shift the story's balance, raising questions nobody wants to ask. Dawn comes with a gray hum, generators, radios, the rustle of paper maps weighed down by rocks. The search grid stretches like a net. Ridges, ravines, creek beds, culverts. Terrain teams move in careful lines. Water teams work the bends. Divers feel their way through black water where fallen trees snag like hooks. In the command area, a whiteboard fills with times, initials, arrows on arrows. And then there's the problem of noise. Not the audible kind, but the flood of tips, memories, sightings, hunches. Possible vehicle. A neighbor's timeline. A screen door's squeal. A dog's bark? Or was that 2 nights ago? You can feel the investigation trying to drink from a fire hose. Online, the story blooms like kudzu. Armchair maps, comment threads, definitive timelines built from fragments and feelings. Faces of strangers posted alongside hashtags. People mean well, most of them do. But every theory shouted becomes a whisper lost on the hill where the work is hard and slow and careful. Inside the official effort, nothing is off the table. Child wanderings can cover shocking distance. Abductions can happen impossibly fast. Family circles are always scrutinized, neighbors too. Every possibility looked at, none discarded without reason. And through it all, the child at the center, the only person who could make the puzzle simple, the only person who cannot speak. Which is more terrifying? The idea that she slipped into the trees unnoticed? Or the idea that someone slipped onto this hill and left with her? The search widens, but the questions tighten. And then, in a week where hope wrestles with exhaustion, a different kind of spotlight hits this story. The press conferences feel like a ritual. A podium under a tent, the flapping of the canvas, microphones blooming like black flowers at the edge of the table. A lawman at the mic thanks the volunteers, asks for tips, says the lines that are both true and thin. We are following every lead. We need the public's help. We cannot share certain details. You listen for something new, an angle that wasn't there yesterday, a phrase that points to a path. But investigative truth grows in the dark. It hates sunlight while it's fragile. Family members speak on camera, awkward, raw, distraught. The whole country becomes a living room where strangers watch grief play out and pass judgments from couches and comment sections. A father's voice cracks. A mother stares at the horizon when she's supposed to stare at the lens. People look for tells in the way hands move, in the chosen words, in the milliseconds between question and answer. But you and I know this: grief and shock are bad actors. They forget their lines. They pick up the wrong prop. They make everything look suspicious to people who want shape, not chaos. Back on the hill, the work goes on: boots and maps and sweat and silence. The cameras will leave before the questions do. The sound of them pulling away is a kind of loneliness. And yet, even as the spotlight moves, a handful of investigators will find a second wind, chasing a thread that seems too thin to hold weight until it does. Modern investigations make their own kind of footprints. Phones leave pings, cars pass cameras, messages timestamp moments. Law enforcement, with warrants and patience, follows digital threads the way searchers follow deer trails. The terrain is different, but the muscles ache all the same. Hours hunched over screens, the mind trying to turn blips into paths. Sometimes, progress is the quietest thing in the room. A clarified timeline, a rumor corrected, a theory knifed by a fact. In a case like this, what didn't happen can be as important as what did. The goal isn't to prove a story true. It's to remove stories that cannot be true until you're left with one that stubbornly refuses to go away. At the same time, the human side strains under the load. People need sleep. Deputies go home with scratches up their shins and the smell of creek water in their hair. Volunteers return to jobs and kids and the sink full of dishes. The hill, unmoved, waits for nobody. What would you do if you were the truth in a case like this? Would you sit in a file nobody has yet opened? Would you live in the gap between a text and a memory? Would you be carried by someone too scared to set you down? If you're still here, subscribe, because stories like this deserve more eyes, more ears, and more voices willing to listen carefully. The louder the noise, the more we need people who can hear the quiet. Because just when the data starts to tighten the picture, the human heart breaks it wide open again. Searchers remember details the way soldiers do. A certain thorn that always catches the pant leg. The way the creek's current pushes just hard enough to steal your balance if you forget who's boss. The smell of wet rock under a bridge. In those first weeks, the teams cover ground that chews you up. Slick clay, rotten logs, holes where the earth has learned to lie. Some move in lines. Others work specific targets, places kids love or places danger hides. They carry more than gear. They carry the pressure of time, the press of eyes, the weight of what if. One more ridge, someone says, as daylight drains and mosquitoes find the soft of your neck. One more pass. Blisters pop. Knees swell. People go home and dream of calling the girl's name into endless trees. Heroes don't wear capes out here. They wear mud and bruises and sunburn, and sometimes they wear defeat like a wet coat they cannot peel off. But they do not stop. And that matters, because in the middle of week 2, when hope has a cough it can't shake, an investigator finds a small contradiction that asks a big question. It's not a smoking gun. It's not a miracle. It's a whisper that doesn't match the song the rest of the evidence is singing. It means another round of interviews, another set of maps, another drive down a road nobody has paid attention to yet. You can feel the story turn, not toward an answer, but toward a crossroads. Amber alerts usually flicker out. They are built for fast rescues, not long mysteries. But this one lingers like a traffic sign left at the edge of a winding road. Caution, child missing. The photo becomes the face of a question the whole state carries around in its pocket. Birthdays pass. Little altars of cupcakes and candles where you sing to an empty chair. School years change. Leaves redden, then fall, then mulch, then disappear into the soil. The hill learns new quiets. Vigils sprout, church basements, gymnasiums, courthouse steps. Familiar rituals, because humans are ritual animals. Tea lights and paper cups, a poem, a reading of a psalm. The announcer's voice wobbling on the names of the search teams to thank. People whisper to each other after, with that soft, solemn tone reserved for funerals and baby dedications. If anyone knows anything, but how do you hold a community together when the story can't move forward? How do you keep a case alive without feeding it rumors like sugar? Some nights, the only thing you can do is stand still and let grief catch up, so it doesn't have to chase you. And then, just when you make peace with the pace of nothing, a case file notes the arrival of a new tip that isn't like the others. When a case grows older, tips often get stranger. People dream clues. They see faces in crowds that bloom into certainty. They call because silence is unbearable. Investigators learn to triage credible, possible noise. Every now and then, a tip pierces the fog. A detail nobody outside could guess. A location that wasn't public. A name that matches a note. Those tips can lift teams out of the rut, send cars out into the night, flip on the lights in a room that's been dark too long. But tips are traps, too. They can eat your week, humiliate your hope, pull resources away from the slow, necessary work. And sometimes they are malicious, people who love the stage more than the truth. The best detectives grow two hearts. One that stays open, curious, compassionate, and one that builds a shell so the first heart doesn't die. Both are needed here. Both are exhausted here. And still, somewhere in the middle of this push and pull, an investigator writes a note in the margin that will matter months later, though nobody knows it yet. Step outside the timeline and study the stage. East Tennessee is not neutral ground. The land moves up, down, in, out, like someone crumpled a map and then tried to flatten it again. Sound bounces or disappears. A child's voice can carry and then vanish in the same 10 steps. A scent can hold in a hollow and then lift like a balloon. Paths look obvious until you try to walk them in the dark with your breath frosting in front of your face. Ask any old-timer. The hills protect their own secrets. This does not mean something mystical. It means physics and folklore agreeing on the same point. It means a creek can hide anything that slips under its skin. It means a truck can be heard too late to matter. It means a door left open for a minute is not the same as a door left open for 5. If a story like this were a novel, the land would be a character. A stubborn one. The kind that never gives you a straight answer and never answers the same question twice. And if the land is a character, then the next chapter belongs to time. The one force that never tires, never negotiates, never stops moving the scene along. At first, time is enemy. Every minute matters. Then it becomes a tool. Distance helps you see shape. Then it turns into a mirror and you see yourself. The mistakes, the assumptions, the good faith, and the blind spots. Case reviews, cold case minds, fresh eyes from other districts. These are the mechanics who take the engine apart and lay the pieces on a cloth, looking for a hairline crack. Anniversaries come with media flurries. The phone rings in the command office. A reporter asks the question they all ask. Is there anything new? The answer is almost always disappointing to a camera but encouraging to a case. We still follow leads. We still ask questions. We still look. There's dignity in the persistence. It is not glamorous. It does not trend. But it is the soil from which answers sometimes grow without warning. And then, because life refuses to wait for clarity, something outside the case threatens to knock the whole effort off balance. The internet is a stadium where whispers echo like shouts. People point fingers. They cut together videos, circle shadows, slow down interviews to dissect pauses between syllables. On the hill, in the office, in the homes of people who love summer, the volume is painful. Under the noise, there are real people who eat and sleep and try to laugh again, who ache when their ordinary grief is treated like entertainment. It matters to say this out loud. A child is missing. This is not content. This is not a mystery box to be solved for likes. This is a wound. And yet, communities online can sometimes help. Flyers spread. A name stays fresh. A driver on a night road remembers a detail because of a post they half-read at lunch. The paradox is intolerable and true. The same medium that multiplies harm can multiply help. So, if you must be here and you are, be the part that helps. Because quietly, far from the storm, an investigator knocks on a door for the 3rd time. And this time, the conversation goes differently. There's a story I've heard from more than one detective. Cases often change on things so small they feel ridiculous. A date on a receipt, a gas pump number, the angle of a shadow in a photo, a neighbor remembering a sound as a bang and not a thump. The fourth interview where a timeline moves by 15 minutes and the movement makes another piece finally fit. None of that is dramatic to the outside world. It is excruciatingly dramatic to the people doing the work. Because a small piece in the right place can tell you where to look next. And where you look next is everything. A file closes. Car door opens. New coordinates. A short drive that, on its face, is just a drive. But when you've been circling the same ridge and creek for months, any new road feels like a risk worth taking. And on that road, an investigator will learn something that confirms nothing, and yet refuses to be dismissed. There are two kinds of endings in true stories: answers and not-yets. An answer is relief even when it hurts. A not-yet is a kind of purgatory. Records open but incomplete, people moving through life with a leash attached to a date on a calendar. For this case, for now, it is the latter. The work does not end with the last camera or the last vigil or the last file update. It goes on in quieter rooms, with people who have learned the patience of long fights. In town, life insists. School buses still grind up hills. A pie still cools on a screened porch. A man fixes a fence where a storm dropped a limb. And something else persists, too. A magnet on a refrigerator with a faded flyer. A text chain that still lights up on dates that matter. A toy on a shelf that nobody dusts because the dust somehow feels like respect. The worst thing a case like this can become is routine. The second worst is spectacle. The only proper thing is promise. That the name Summer is not a headline but a commitment. And when the story will turn next, no one can say. But it will turn. Everything turns, even hills, if you wait long enough. Walk back up the ridge with me one last time. Stand by the steps where flowers bloom in defiance of memory. Look out over the trees that have learned as many secrets as any courthouse archive. Listen to the sounds the hill keeps. Dog tags clinking, a motorcycle far on the road, a wind that moves wrong when a storm wants to be born. Then close your eyes and say a 5-year-old's name into the air. Not loudly, just enough for the wind to carry it to the corners of a yard that should still be noisy. Summer. If there is an answer, it is not afraid of your attention. If there is someone who knows, they are not immune to your asking. If there is a path that leads from this door to the truth, it will be walked, not alone, but by a community that refuses to set the burden down. And somewhere, a case file closes for the night. Lights click off. A deputy sits in a quiet truck, and for a second, the whole weight of the thing lifts. Tomorrow, they will pick it up again. Here's the part where I tell you what to think. I won't. The truth is too important to be dressed up as certainty. What I can tell you is this. A child is missing, and as long as that is true, the story doesn't end. Pauses. It waits for someone to speak, for something to shift, for time to let go of what it's holding. If you're still with me, subscribe, because the only way stories like this keep their power is if we keep showing up. We'll keep telling them with respect, with patience, and with the attention they deserve. And now, your turn. What do you think happened? Leave your theory in the comments. Speak with care, with empathy, with discipline. Someone out there knows the truth. Until then, may the hills give up what they know. May the night relent. May a child's name move from our mouths to our doorways home. Summer.